Much gratitude for joining us today and welcome to the John Mini podcast, where we explore all things urban horticulture indoors and out through the perspectives of the many amazing people who have made it their career. I'm your host, Mark Mini, president of John Mini Distinctive Landscapes, and at John Mini, our team's purpose is to make places beautiful by bringing nature to the places people live, work, and play. Today, we'll be sitting down with two teammates from the John Mini Distinctive Landscapes team in New York, Keith Berenger and Phil Adams. Together, they have over 28 years of experience working on and providing solutions for urban landscapes. In today's episode, Phil and Keith partake in our reoccurring conversation on the importance of outdoor urban landscapes. We'll share some stories from their beginnings in the world of urban landscaping. We'll talk about their thoughts on the importance of outdoor landscapes in cities. From their experience, they'll share some reasons their clients invest in these spaces and highlight some shifts in the marketplace that relate to urban development and landscaping. All right, without further ado, let's head over to our conversation with Keith and Phil. All right, we are live. Welcome, Keith and Phil, to the John Mini podcast.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Ready to jump in. We're going to be discussing why outdoor urban landscapes are important to you guys. I'm pumped for our conversation. You guys are obviously two colleagues of mine. I'm honored to work alongside you guys. We work hard together, but we also have fun and we collaborate relentlessly. So I feel like this is going to be just like a fun, good conversation.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Hell yeah. And you guys also, I should know you guys bring a combined at least 20 years of experience, or maybe more than that, right?
Yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah. 20 years of experience in urban landscapes, not just outdoor, a lot in outdoor urban landscapes, but also indoor urban landscapes. So you guys have a lot of experience, and it's from the ground up. You guys, like myself, we started the early days driving the trucks, installing a lot of urban landscapes and maintaining them. But today you guys really are the leads on either the leads or supporting on some solutions for some of the most cutting edge landscapes all over the New York area. So yeah, I'm not messing around. You guys come with some experience.
Absolutely.
You remember the early days.
I do. I do. In preparing for this episode, I started to go back in my brain, and I got
down memory lane.
Very nostalgic for the early days of outdoor at John Mini. So I was hoping we could maybe wrap on that part for a few minutes before we get started. There was amazing outdoor work happening here before we joined. Like, we can't deny that. But I think we all started around the same time, 2008 to 2010.
Yeah, I was 2012.
Okay.
I've been in 12 years.
And I just remember that we had, primarily an indoor company at that time, but inevitably got approached by some of our indoor clients that had outdoor spaces. And they said, can you guys maintain these for us? And we said, sure. Some of it we figured out along the way. I remember a very funny story of one of our team members having to travel via subway car with a push mower to get from one job to another, which was, I'm sure, a sight for everybody on the subway.
It's not an easy task to get into the subway with that.
I don't know how we got it down the stairs, but
that or through the turnstile, right?
True. He was
like,
determined.
Take this side.
That just goes to show customer service level.
Whatever it takes.
But no, then we started to make a lot of the right investments in the people and the equipment along the way, and kind of approached it almost as a startup, like just learning the ropes. And I think it was perfect timing. There was a sea change in New York City, in my opinion, with the way high-end residential buildings were being developed right around that time, especially in areas, down in like Chelsea, uptown, where anytime a new high-end residential building was being designed, they definitely were going to be including some amenity space, terraces, rooftops, and they had to outdo the building that was next to it or built right before it. So it just kept getting grander and grander and really being part of the intent and not just a tack on of the building.
A thought afterwards. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
I really enjoy, so I didn't start as early as you did, Keith, but I was a few years after, but then it was still in its infancy, the outdoor department. But seeing what it is today is really amazing to see the organization and how structured that team has really become. So
totally. And I mean, just to go back to what we were saying before, most of our indoor maintenance, you're able to handle via public transportation. The equipment's that they're waiting for you, or it's easy to travel with. But
Sure.
you know, we had to invest in Sprinter vans at that time. We didn't have service vehicles for our indoor department as well. We did, but not as like necessary as outdoor. You know, traveling around with backpack blowers, mowers.
Right. A lot more debris.
Yeah.
There's different challenges.
I remember
we were able to like take our approach and our values from the indoor side of life, like quality and high customer service and distinctiveness on the design side. We were able to take those, but found out like a lot of the operational things had to change. And that was like the big learnings, like from the type of equipment, obviously the technical skills needed and stuff like that. Yeah.
Totally. No, and we proved ourselves as a major player really quickly, and I think that really gave us a lot of other opportunities with companies that saw what we could do on the outdoor side.
True. Cool. All right, so let's dive in, right?
Let's do it.
So why do you guys, whoever wants to go first, start with like why you believe personally, right, that outdoor urban landscapes are important?
I'll take it. So outdoor urban landscapes offer sanctuaries in the concrete jungle, even if it's just for a brief moment when you're walking by. It could be a front entry planter to Central Park. Like it can vary anyway, and having just that moment of repose and being able to see a flower or see a bee in a shrub or whatever it might be, I think that makes it most important. They offer habitat, stormwater retention opportunities, cooling from heat island, and aesthetics with beauty. And they plants are always evolving. They die, they bloom, they leaf out, the leaves change colors, they drop. There's always some type of artistry going on, which I find really fun, especially inside of a built environment.
Yeah, I think like the first point you make, I mean, you also, we operate a lot in, not just in, but a lot in New York City, right? But in any dense urban environment, that respite, an urban landscape can provide. You reference concrete jungle because that's a nickname for New York City, but it's true, right? By integrating the urban landscapes, like what benefits, like is that respite, bringing to people who either live or work in those places?
Yeah, I mean, if you're surrounded by nothing but concrete and steel or crazy cab drivers and everything else that we deal with in New York, having something that is visually appealing to look at and it's just as fragile as we are, I think can really ground us. And, I think we appreciate that.
True. I like to think about, I agree 100%. And like in a dense urban environment, I think, like tech overstimulation is like a big piece of that. Like no matter where you're in the world, right? Like you're focused on your computer, your phones, right? There's this overstimulation of technology, but then you add like being in a city with like so much like non-natural infrastructure or environment around you, like, integrating those natural elements can just like help, provide that mental benefit.
Like
of,
a digital
like,
detox.
Yeah, like a detox from like overstimulation, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. About you?
So I have a similar answer, but from a different perspective. People choose to live in cities. Either they were born and raised in New York and they choose to stay here, or they're from another part of the world and they choose to move here. But people that live and work here want to be here. And what I mean by that is when you choose to live to a city, you want that city experience. And I really feel like an outdoor area allows you to experience that. And this could be, a 76th floor terrace where you have these amazing viewpoints and skyscrapers and landmarks around the city for miles, or even some of our terraces that are on the second or third floor where you look up and you're surrounded by skyscrapers. You just feel like you're in the middle of it and you're enjoying that city that you live in. It's not as the same as looking out the window of an office building to be out in an outdoor area and have the sky above you and have the city around you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to think about it. It's like there's this like, I don't know what's the right word, like a paradox, right? So if you grow up like not in the city, there's a lot of people who like don't grow up in a big city, and they're like, they feel uncomfortable or they're even nervous or scared of like going into the
Yep.
big city. But there's also like a reverse effect. If you grow up in a city, like
Yep.
you kind of get like, I know people like grow up in a city and they go into like a forest and they get like
Yeah.
really nervous, where some people who grew up around a forest are like, that's their calm space.
Totally.
But like if you live in the city and then you integrate like these natural elements, it's like you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, right? Almost.
100%.
That's really
And
interesting.
I feel like the gut reaction to that question from a lot of people is going to be like, oh, living in a city or working in a city is overstimulating and you need these outdoor areas to hide from the city, to get away from it. But I feel the opposite way. I think it just gives you an excellent place to enjoy your, place of where you live or where you work.
I really love that
Yeah.
question and what we just spoke about before, because I was on a class trip when I was in college. We went to Philadelphia, and I remember seeing a landscaper in Philadelphia. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, they're in the city. Like, who would want to do that?
What are they landscaping in the city?
Exactly. And I had been doing suburban landscaping prior to this. And now I almost can't picture it the other way around. Like, there's been so much investment in urban landscaping over the past 2 decades. There's really no other place I'd rather be working.
Yeah, true. That's cool. And I think, I think people do sometimes look at like that back to your point, Keith, it's like, well, why you have to fabricate these like, landscapes and environments within this like, steel and concrete jungle. Like why,
Yeah.
But like there's, people have different preferences and they choose to live in the city. And there's also like, positive benefits to that. We talked about this on another episode about, I have these convictions about how environmentally like sustainable like dense cities can be. So we kind of want more people living in and around like dense cities for, efficiencies for the environment. But it's also maybe not sustainable like mental health wise and physically, overstimulation, unless we integrate some of these,
Yep.
The softer pieces too. So there's like a flip side to that argument as well, I feel like. You guys work, very closely with the clients often that you collaborate with. What do you feel are the most compelling reasons why outdoor urban landscapes are from your clients' perspectives that you collaborate with?
I think that, I think that it really depends on the client.
Sure.
I think
You always skip that answer. It's like, of course, but like any like overarching,
I wanted to say, like, if it's an office building, they're trying
Yeah.
to entice tenants to move in. So they want to have an amenity space in their building that is going to offer a space for their building tenants to gather, have lunch, and offer an amenity.
Mm-hmm.
If it's an office, an individual office, they want to offer an outdoor amenity space for clients, to entice employees to come back to the office. Maybe there is some sustainability category within their initiatives that offer beekeeping or whatever. So there's an outdoor amenity. If it's a residential condo building, they want to offer amenity spaces for their tenants, like Keith was mentioning before. And then if it's a private client looking to landscape their private terrace or rooftop or backyard, it's aesthetics, it's beauty,
It can vary a lot.
it can vary a lot.
Yeah, I know. I jokingly like challenge you, like you can't just say that politically correct, but it's true. Like it does depend on the client. But yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I mean, the other way we could look at it is like putting a sedum roof on a roof. That's urban landscape. There's habitat inside of that. There's functionality to it because it's cooling and keeping insulation and slowing down stormwater. So I think there's a client for that. And now New York City's mandating green roofs with Local 9294.
Mm-hmm.
Any unoccupied rooftop needs a green roof or solar panels.
Interesting. So that's like shifts maybe. So like, do you see any other shifts in like, from the client's perspective on like why, they feel like they need to integrate more outdoor urban landscapes? That's one shift, right? Like, hey, integrating more like sustainable aspects of the landscape, right? Like green roofs. And
I think there's a little bit of a snowball effect because they see it elsewhere now and they want to add it to their home or update their home or their property, whatever it might be. So I think there's a snowball effect, and which is it's awesome. Keep greening.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
I mean, I think having an outdoor space, it's just a benefit, right? It as popular as it's become in new landscaping and or just new architecture, it is still somewhat a rarity. Not every building has an outdoor space. I lived in cities for 12 years of my life so far, and my favorite place, and only one of them had this, had a very small outdoor terrace. It was a covered terrace, 3 foot by 8 foot. And just having that space to walk out on and clear your head at the end of the day was just incredible. Hearing birds chirping, getting some sunlight, hearing the noise of the city around you, it was incredible. The other thing that I wanted to maybe start a little discussion on, and I tried to do some back of the napkin math on this before this. So if any of our clients that are general contractors or developers are listening to this and are going to call me out for being wrong, I'm open to the conversation, but I would argue that it's more cost effective to build and maintain an outdoor space versus an indoor space per square foot. If you factor in, just pick a, 100 foot by 100 foot area on a building, to have to build that out and enclose it versus, putting a significant budget towards landscaping it with built-in furniture, planter beds, things of that nature, I'm guessing is more cost effective. And it's definitely got to be more cost effective to maintain. You don't have to cool or heat an outdoor space. You don't have to worry about as complex as like plumbing, electric, things like that. So I do think if you're deciding what to do with a part of your building, indoor versus outdoor, you can save money. You can create something that not every building has, and it can be a major amenity space for your building. But again, I don't have the math on that, so I could be wildly wrong, but that's my gut reaction.
I don't know how to break out that cost either, but I know marketing teams love having outdoor spaces.
Totally.
They love having the big green rendering of a garden to market to the public.
Yeah. No, I mean, amazing. Like, I think you guys bring up like the cost and the marketing of it. So we're like, hey, does this space like help you be more cost effective? Does this space help you generate more revenue, right? Marketing. I think that's a reason you got to bring up to, especially when you talk about the, other perspectives, you need to talk about the economics of it. And you use the word benefit. I love that. You can think about that from two aspects, at least what we're seeing out in the marketplace, like from the commercial office building standpoint or the residential standpoint, right? It's a benefit, right? If you're competing for tenants to occupy their offices, like it is a benefit to have like a beautiful outdoor respite, right? Or a collaborative space that you can have team meetings, or a respite because you've been jamming and working hard all day and you just need to clear your head for a second. And the same thing on the residential side, like that is a benefit that you're trying to invest in or differentiate yourself from to get residents in your building, right? 100%. Or have higher value, right? Versus other buildings. Yeah. That's interesting.
Even on that same theme, I think it's a benefit as an end user, as a company, for recruiting, for employee happiness.
Competing for talent, for
100%.
sure.
Like, we just finished a project with a client that moved from a beautiful office space into a newer, even more larger, beautiful office space. But this new office space they just moved into has an outdoor terrace. And I'm biased, but I do feel like that's what a lot of them are the most excited about in getting into this new office, is having access to this outdoor terrace where they can have meetings, people can break out for lunch, enjoy sunsets, things like that. So
yeah, it's really interesting. And I think I shouldn't go there. Like there is data on that. I don't know, and I don't know where to pull up that data quickly, but I've been perusing Gensler, the large global architecture firm. They put out like a state of the workplace or I think it's the workplace report. I don't know how long they've been doing it, but I've been seeing it since, the outbreak of COVID, when it was like, oh, what's going to happen to workspaces? But the most recent one, I think it was like 2022 or 23, they're ranking, aspects of the commercial office space and like how important that was to the workers in there. And outdoor workspaces were like very high on the list. We can share in the show notes what exactly, they ranked, but it was a really important amenity for, workers in, office buildings and stuff like that. So I found it like the data's there. Yeah. That's what people are asking for. So this might be like a fully loaded, I don't even know what how, I think there's value here. Like, let's go to, relative to suburban landscaping, right? We're talking about urban landscaping. Like, do you find, I would assume, but like, do you find there are differences in the importance of investing in outdoor landscapes in a city as compared to the suburbs? And like, what are those differences?
All right. I think this is a touchy one. Because there's a lot. Suburban can picture a lot of things. Like there's a lot of different styles of.
Why touchy? You say like.
Well,
I'm just looking for the differences. I don't. Yeah.
My mind goes to like.
I'm not trying to say like one's better than the other.
No. And that's not where I was going.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that urban landscaping is a little bit more. The stylistic of urban landscaping is a little bit smaller and more defined than suburban landscaping. Because when you think of suburban landscaping, there's the gamut of, small town USA that has a little garden with a picket fence to big estates along an ocean. That's all suburban landscaping. So there's a lot more variety of suburban landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
But vast majority of suburban landscaping is lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's larger properties, there's cost of maintaining it. There's also a lot more challenges with deer. There's neighborhood aesthetics, where the city, there's a different aesthetic around every corner. And, everyone has an individualized aesthetic, where I feel like in suburbia, if it's a built development, that development has been designed by someone, and there's a row of trees that every house has the same tree in front of it. Or if it's an older, more established neighborhood, maybe it was cut through an old farmland that used to be whatever, or cut through it was clear cut and they kept some old growth trees. So I think there's neighborhood aesthetics that really define suburban landscaping.
What about the differences in like why people invest in like their landscape in the city versus like the suburbs? Are there differences?
I think there's concepts that pull from suburbia to the urban landscape, and I'm sure there's a little bit the inverse, but sure. I think people who are looking to invest in their urban landscape probably have history of doing landscaping in a suburban environment as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if the differences are like there's going to be differences versus just like how it's executed, but I don't know. What do you think?
So I have a little bit of a different approach than where you guys are going with this conversation. So maybe it'll start a new conversation. All right. So we're recording this episode up in our headquarters in Rockland County, and between here and the city, on both sides of the river, it's the suburbs. But they're not like sprawling suburbs, right? They're more condensed suburbs. A lot of commuter towns for like towns that are along like train lines to get into the city. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed over the past 5 to 10 years in these quote unquote suburban areas is those apartment complexes that they build in the hearts of the downtowns of these suburban areas, those 2 to 3 story areas, are now being built with rooftops, where I swear 10 years ago they weren't. Like maybe each of those units had their own small terrace to go out onto, but they weren't creating rooftop amenity spaces.
Interesting.
So I think they've almost taken a note from some of the architecture and developments of these like high rises in the city that if we're going to compete and convince people that this suburban experience is, on the same level as what you'd get in like a high-end city apartment, we need to up our game in terms of like rooftop outdoor landscape spaces. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, a lot of these buildings, they had beautiful courtyards, front entry areas.
Front entrance, like almost curb appeal landscaping.
Yeah.
But I think that's like an interesting point that maybe like a reason we miss is like some of these outdoor amenities that are landscaped in the city, like part of the reason is to induce socialization. So like to get people to like convene, like have a barbecue, like on the rooftop or like hang out together, have, a gathering moment. Because that's the same thing you want, like maybe that's hard, like the city's known for that. People just like colliding with each other, right? In the suburbs, maybe that's not as common, but when you build these like, smaller apartment buildings in the suburbs, like, well, let's try to lean into that socialization aspect. kind of touched on this, we started talking about like trends in outdoor urban landscapes. I guess first question is like almost like a yes or no. Like, do you guys feel that, outdoor urban landscapes are becoming more integral or prioritized in urban development?
I actually was really excited to see this question. I do a lot of research for upcoming projects and whatnot, and one of those sites that I frequent has started to incorporate the name of the landscape architecture firm who's designing the gardens for that building. 5 years ago, that information wasn't noted. The landscape architect was not, it was an afterthought, or maybe more than 5 years ago. But that's much more of a recent input, and people are much more interested to see, oh wow, like so and so is the designer for the gardens. I think that's really cool to see that on a construction site, on a construction website, like for new future developments.
Cool.
Definitely. And on that same subject, anytime you research or find articles on future cities where they have these elaborate, like insane renderings of what a future city looks like, 95% of the building is covered in plant life and greenery. So it's inevitable. It's just headed that way, and I think it's going to continue to be a major piece of what future cities look like.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Renderings scare me though. Especially from like the builder side, because a lot of times renderings are put together by an artist and they're so green.
You're just talking about from an execution standpoint.
Yeah, execution from the building.
I get excited.
The builder's like, for sure.
Let's do it.
We always get excited, but I definitely think that renderings have taken a very green approach, and sometimes it's the end outcome might not be as green up front. It'll get there, but
yeah,
totally.
No, I think the media is like a good like reference point. Like when you see like these cool like futuristic renderings of cities or a project, you can even go to like movies. There's like common categories like that. Apocalyptic movie scenario in the future, like what's happening in the world, and when it's like a dark thing, it's like there's no trees on the planet's like dusty and decay, or like then you have utopia where it's like green and lush and stuff like that. It's like the same thing. Like you want a more beautiful environment, a beautiful city. Like often the rendering is like bombed out with like plants and trees, and I think that's like helping to the popularization of urban landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any other reasons you'd like to share that we haven't touched on the importance of outdoor landscapes in cities?
Just to kind of go back to recap what we were talking about earlier, there really is so much amazing architecture and construction that's come on board in cities that incorporates landscaping as an intentional part of the design, and really cutting edge work.
I may have mentioned this in the last podcast that we did. Cities are much more diverse in floral culture than a suburb, and every terrace are different, much variety as condensed as you are in an urban environment. So I think there's a lot of benefits to having that. As far as bee pollinating and whatnot, you're getting a lot more opportunities for different flavors and for insects to feed on different products, and all be part of that bee corridor.
That's interesting. I think, I would should like to post some actual data on this in the show notes, but I think New York City, one of our playgrounds is actually ranks pretty high in biodiversity. People wouldn't think that. That attributes to, wildlife as well as, variety in plants and ecosystem. Yeah. Cool. How about any final thoughts or maybe things you think we're missing from this conversation? I want to make sure this is going to be an ongoing, conversation to have with different, players in our industry and on our team, because I think there are going to be varying perspectives. But do you think there's anything we're not covering in this conversation that we should be?
I would say how to tame or how to best select the plant for the space. In so many cases where New York City is a lot of drastic sun shade patterns. Like you might get a lot of sun in the morning, but it's shade all afternoon, or vice versa, where there's sun all winter and bush sun in the summertime. So I think there's like the right plant for the right space. I think that's kind of like a final thought.
Cool. By you?
One thing I'm seeing more of on some of the projects that we're seeing early on in development is when you think about urban landscaping and a lot of what we do, it's areas not on the wall, terraces, courtyards, things like that. But I have been seeing more and more larger development projects of some areas that are getting redeveloped, especially in some of the outer boroughs, where they're going to be creating more larger park areas, areas that were once concrete, turning it into like connected parks to make it more of an enticing space to bring people into new neighborhoods. So I am excited to get more into that part of it.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's interesting, and I wonder if like that development is going to like coincide with specific to not all urban areas, but in New York City, there's a lot of things happening to to try to reduce like traffic with congestion pricing, like vehicle traffic, and investing more in like public transit. So like getting rid of maybe some of more of that the parking lot space and like the roadway spaces and integrating that to more ground level parks is interesting. I wonder if those are happening side by side.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you think of land as a very limited resource in the city, which it is. Once built spaces that are getting renovated, sometimes they're actually returning that into park space as opposed to development.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I guess I have one more final thought after my original final thought would be that there's not
the final
thought. There's no size restriction to an urban landscape. I think that it can vary from a small pot that you have on your windowsill, might be, to a large roof deck to a park somewhere. I think they're all working together as far to create one large scape combined.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it goes back to like Keith talking about even that like one place he once lived at in the city just had like even like a 3x8 foot like outdoor space and making it your own urban outdoor landscape. It doesn't matter. You can be as grand as possible or as small.
Exactly.
As possible. Yeah. Cool. All right. As I round out, this episode, I always close with this question. What is something you guys are particularly passionate about right now in your craft?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
All right. So as I was prepping for this episode, the answer I'm going to give is very fresh in my mind. We're recording this episode on Arbor Day, and Monday was Earth Day. So we'll call it Earth Week. And we did a lot of...
Every week's Earth Week for us.
We had a number of great...
Arbor Day.
And Arbor Day.
That's true. And every day is Arbor Day.
No joke. The three of us are actually planting about 51 trees after this episode wraps. So.
And our team this week has planted a lot more than that.
So more to come on that. But we've had a number of great client events this past week where we presented to the employees of some of the companies we do business with at their location on the importance of plants, which is really cool because, Phil, as you know, like normally when you're dealing with a client, you have one, maybe two main points of contact you deal with on a regular basis. But this gave me the opportunity to speak to the employees, like hundreds of employees at these locations that get to enjoy the work we do. And I thought that was really a win-win because we were able to have them walk away from these events with a better understanding of our craft and an appreciation for all the intricate work and science that goes into maintaining these spaces. And it was really nice to have those connections with the end users, if that makes sense.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm definitely passionate about that too right now. Like it's part of why we're doing this podcast is just like sharing more education and like, information and engagement around our craft and like the science behind, urban horticulture. That's really cool.
Definitely.
So a recent one that I had just given with how to plants create a habitat for not just us, but for insects. But I think also being more sustainable and choosing less plants that are going to be temporary plantings that might need to be replaced, choosing a plant that's going to have more longevity, pairing that with a plant that might give seasonal interest and aesthetic beauty.
Awesome final thoughts and what you guys are obsessing about in your craft right now. And that's it. That's all I got today, guys. I appreciate your time. It was an honor. It was fun conversation. So I appreciate you guys' time today.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I always enjoy doing these.
And enjoy that podcast outro.
Oh yeah, we have Keith here today with us. He is the what is it? The producer of our intro and outro music for the John Mini podcast. Well, there you have it. Big shout out to Keith for producing the John Mini podcast intro and outro music. And most importantly, thank you to Keith and Phil for sharing their thoughts with us today. Thank you to all our listeners for taking the time to be here with us today. Listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. This is a new endeavor for us, and we're committed to getting it right for you. If you guys have any questions, ideas for future episodes, or my favorite, any constructive feedback, please email us at podcast@johnmini.com. And always a big final thank you to all our clients at John Mini Distinctive Landscapes. You guys allow us to make our passion our profession. None of this is possible without your support and vision to bring nature to the places people live, work, and play. This episode is a wrap. I hope you guys have a great day, and be sure to find a moment in your busy day to cherish the nature around you.